Hi everybody, Bajaj Finance is one of the most legendary companies in the Indian business history. And if you look at the ticker tape analysis, it is nothing short of mind-blowing. From January 2000 to the present times, Bajaj Finance has given a return of 1.5 lakh% to its investors. And if you just invested 10,000 rupees in Bajaj Finance in 2000, today your wealth will be worth at least 1.6 crores. And this return rate is more than Apple and Amazon during the same period and more than the total returns of Google, Facebook and even Netflix. And if you look at the financials of the company in comparison to its competitors, while Cholamandalam generated a revenue of 9,583 crores, Muthoot Finance stood at 11,566 crores, whereas Bajaj Finance generated a revenue of 26,683 crores. And even in terms of net income, while Cholamandalam had a net income of 1,520 crores, Muthoot generated an income of 3,804 crores, Bajaj Finance was way ahead with a net income of 4,419 crores. The question is, how did Bajaj Finance get so far ahead of its competition? What exactly was their business strategy that made them such a powerful player in the Indian market? And most importantly, what are the business lessons that we need to learn from the iconic case study of Bajaj Finance? This video is brought to you by Wind Wealth, but more on this at the end of the video. This is a story that dates back to May 2007 when Bajaj Auto announced breaking up of its flagship entity into three companies: Bajaj Auto Limited, Bajaj Holdings and Investments, and finally we had Bajaj Finserv Limited, whose subsidiary is the hero of our story, which is Bajaj Finance. And like any other legendary company, Bajaj Finance identified a very important gap in the market. To tell you about it, if you asked your parents about the financial services that were existing back then, they will tell you that back then taking up loans was only meant for buying a house, a car, or at max a bike. And the process of taking up this loan was extremely tedious. It was so tedious that finding the perfect flat took 2 months, whereas the process of finding the right bank with affordable rate of interest itself took 3 months. This was because the bank had to process all these queries very carefully, and they had to make sure that they're only lending to those people who are capable of paying the money back. So when it comes to taking loans for anything less than a bike, for things like AC and dishwashers, no one wanted to carry out such a tedious procedure. And secondly, no bank thought it to be viable enough to carry out this tedious process needed to give out these loans. For example, if you take a home loan of 50 lakhs at 7% interest, you will be paying back close to 70 lakhs in the next 10 years, giving the bank a profit of 20 lakh rupees. But when it comes to taking up a loan of 30,000 rupees for buying a TV, charging an interest on this meager amount could barely make any profit considering the tedious procedure that is at play. Therefore, loans for anything less than a car or bike was neither customer desirable nor market viable. But this is where, ladies and gentlemen, Bajaj Finance came in, and it brought in a revolution in financing using its technological feasibility. And they captured a completely untapped market, which was the lending for consumer durables. In this case, it was everything from LED TV, washing machine to even something as simple as hair dryers. Now the question over here is, when banks could not do it, how did Bajaj Finance make this process both customer desirable and market viable? Well, the first thing they did right was get the timing right. Because if you look at the per capita spending of Indians, it actually shot up by almost 100% from 2008 to 2019, going from just $682 to $1,222. And this essentially indicated that the Indian middle class was spending more on upgrading their lifestyle and they were focused on consuming more. And this is where Bajaj Finance over time started collecting massive amounts of data about the Indian middle class. And they started mining this data to understand and spot low risk, high ticket customers. And a classic example of the same was how Bajaj Finance used data science to identify low risk, high income customers in the self-employed category. Now let's take a contrived example to understand this. So back in 2010-11, if a self-employed person like a beauty parlor owner applied for a loan, he or she would be charged more interest as compared to a salaried individual by default. Why? Because self-employed people were assumed to have less stable income as compared to a salaried individual. But for the same audience, instead of drawing a conclusion, a company like Bajaj Finance will first collect data about every single beauty parlor owner and employee in the country. So if there are 50,000 beauty parlors in India, this company will do its level best to collect every possible detail of all these owners. And the parameters of analysis will not just include the income and the age of the owner, but also the location of the parlor, the type of services she offers, the cost range of her services, the spending patterns of that particular locality, the growth of the market, and even the training centers that they went to. After that, the algorithm will categorize these individuals into 100 different categories based on their risk profile. For example, if a person is running a beauty parlor in a locality like Talegaon, he will be charged a higher rate of interest or will be given less loan as compared to a Javed Habib franchise owner operating at the heart of Pune like FC Road. And now that they have so much data which keeps getting refined with each passing day, tomorrow if you are a beauty parlor owner and you go to Bajaj Finance to buy a TV, your request will be processed within just 2 minutes, and that too with minimum input. Why? Because the algorithm of Bajaj Finance has processed so much data that it can easily predict how much you're capable of paying back and what is the risk involved in lending you money. And just like Saurav Mukherjee explains in this interview with Edelweiss, Bajaj Finance did the same with doctors, dentists and chartered accountants to identify low-risk, high-income individuals to sell their service. And this insane ability to process data gave Bajaj Finance the superpower to give out something called zero-cost EMI or no-cost EMI to its customers. Which means what? If a customer wants to buy a TV for 60,000 rupees, she just has to pay 1/3 the cost, or in this case 20,000 rupees as upfront payment, and can split her bill into an 8-month EMI and has to pay 0% interest on the loan. And all Bajaj Finance earns is a little over 1% from the processing fee. Now this was nothing short of a revolution because it was a gateway to the dreams for the affluent Indian middle class. This is how Bajaj Finance made the entire process of borrowing into a customer desirable action. Now the second question over here is, all this is fine, but how did Bajaj Finance manage to make such hefty profits with just this processing fee? Isn't that too less? If you're thinking this, you are absolutely right, which is why Bajaj Finance doesn't just make money from you, but also gets a handsome 5% discount from the manufacturer to offer financing to its customers. So if a TV costs 40,000 rupees, Bajaj Finance lends 40,000 rupees but has to pay the manufacturer only 38,000 rupees due to the 5% discount, making it an additional 5% of the value of the product as its profit. And the reason why this was game changing was because when an Indian middle class family sees two televisions, one of Samsung, the other of OnePlus, both costing 40,000 rupees, if Samsung is asking them to pay 40,000 rupees upfront and OnePlus gives them a zero cost EMI option to split the bill into 8 parts, asking them to pay only 3,500 rupees per month, which television do you think the family is going to opt in for? Obviously the OnePlus TV, right? This is the reason why the manufacturers gave Bajaj Finance a discount of 5%, because of which manufacturers like OnePlus were able to increase their sales due to both reduction in entry barrier and the ease of payment. As a result, even rivals like Samsung started tying up with Bajaj Finance, because of which in the race of keeping up with the market, hundreds of companies started tying up with Bajaj Finance, turning it into the most powerful player in consumer durables financing space. And today, Bajaj Finance is India's largest consumer durable financing company, with 70% of all such products financed by Bajaj Finance itself. And all thanks to their data analytics algorithm. According to HDFC Research, their gross non-performing asset has never crossed 1.7% since FY12. As in, out of the total money lent, the amount of lending that are overdue from the borrowers has never crossed 1.7%. And this is quite extraordinary. This is the reason why, since the past 10 years, Bajaj Finance has been able to achieve a compound annual sales growth of 33%, the profits have shot up by a CAGR of 32%, and the stock price has shot up by a mind-boggling CAGR of 62%. This is how Bajaj Finance became one of the most legendary non-banking finance companies in the Indian business history. And this brings me to the most important part of the episode, and that are the lessons from the iconic rise of Bajaj Finance. Before we move on, we have an important announcement from our partners Vint Wealth to all those who want to invest in bonds. People, now that you understand what NBFCs are and their importance in the existing system, have you ever wondered how these NBFCs raise money? Well, there are two ways in which they do it. Number one is through equity like Bajaj Finance. Number two is by raising money through debt. When it comes to raising money through debt, you need to understand a concept called tranches. Now, a company like Bajaj Finance normally gives personal loans which can be anywhere between 3 months to 36 months. And to give out these loans, they need money, and this money is raised through debt. And they do that by launching opportunities to investors to invest in various tranches, like a 1-year tranche or a 2-year tranche. This is beneficial for the entity to have multiple maturities for the borrowed money. And this is where our partners Vint Wealth come in. Vint Wealth gives opportunities to investors like you and me to invest in opportunities with tranches wherein you can choose to invest in multiple maturities through tranches of the same issue. For example, if you invest in a 2-year tranche, it gives you a return of 9% XIRR, whereas a 3-year tranche can give you a slightly higher interest of say 9.3% XIRR. This increases also because the risk increases a little with increase in the tenure of the bond. And you must also note that you can also invest in both the tranches to divide your investment into 2 maturities. This gives the power to the user to choose where they want to invest and how much. And the best part is that Vint Wealth plans to bring many such bonds in the near future. And as always, it will also make sure that you're educated about these opportunities with all the information with the utmost transparency. So to contact them or to learn more about investing in these NBFC related opportunities, you can subscribe to their free newsletter through the link in the description. Moving on, there are 3 very important lessons that we need to learn from the iconic case study of Bajaj Finance. Lesson number 1. Every time you enter the market, always try to evaluate your product or service through the 3 pillars of innovation, which are customer desirability, market viability, and technological feasibility. If one of them is missing, then work upon building that pillar, because without it, the whole system wouldn't be functional. In this case, if you see, financing for consumer durables was neither customer desirable nor market viable. But as soon as Bajaj Finance brought in its technological feasibility with data science, it is able to place its service at the sweet spot of innovation. Lesson number 2. Whenever you decide to sell your product or service, always be very careful about choosing where to extract your profits from. In this case, if you see, if Bajaj Finance had gone by the traditional way of extracting from the borrowers, the rate of interest itself would have become the entry barrier for the customers. But Bajaj Finance chose to go the other end and decided to tap into the manufacturer's margins. And this gave them both higher margins and easy market penetration. And last and most importantly, as Mukesh Ambani once said, data is the new oil. So the ones who have it in plenty will have an unfair advantage over their competition. In this case, with each passing day, Bajaj Finance is collecting data about people like you and me, trying to understand the sweet spot in the market, because of which it has built a huge barrier that is very difficult for its competitors to cope up with. Now, before we say goodbye, considering this point of data and consumer spending, my question to you is, can you tell me where cred is heading? And here's a hint. They have the richest 1% as their customers. They know every single detail of who spends how much and that too on what. And most importantly, with each passing day, they are collecting a huge amount of data from the most accurate instrument of spending, which is a credit card. Think about it and let me know what is your opinion in the comments section. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. Check out Vint Wealth and the amazing investment opportunities that they have to offer. And please support our work by subscribing to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.